welcome back to another video on the channel. We obviously still haven't got any tennis to talk about, unfortunately, so I'm going to do this video on the top 5 players who I think could break into the top 10 at the end of this season if we do get any tennis, if not in 2021. So kicking things off with the 14th ranked player currently, the young Russian Andrei Rublev. He obviously started the season as the form player, you've got to say. He went an 11-0 run, winning titles in Adelaide and Doha, and then he cruised to the opening 3 rounds at the Australian Open. Looked set for a huge run there. Obviously ran into Alexander Zverev in round 4 and lost in straight sets. I think by that point Rublev was slightly fatigued. He didn't play to his full potential, but also Zverev played a fantastic Australian Open, as we know, reaching the semi-finals, and Zverev served fantastically all tournament, and Rublev didn't really get a look in. He never really got into that match, but that's no disgrace when you consider the run he had, the titles that he'd won. He still had a fantastic start of 2020. He's already climbed the rankings, and this break probably doesn't come at a good time for a player that was in such good form. Just a little bit about Rublev. His forehand is very, very consistent, but undoubtedly his best shot is double-handed backhand. It's a huge rep, and it's ultra consistent again. He finds the lines very often with real power and precision, and he is a very strong player with his ground strokes. His first serve is very good, but something for Rublev to learn for the future. I think maybe he makes too many double faults, a few too many unforced errors. I mean, at the start of the year when he's in form and he's hitting the forehand and backhand down the line that he can, he's pretty much unstoppable, as that 11-0 record suggests into the early part of 2020. But if he was to have an off day, then it really is an off day for Andre, and he does make a few too many errors. He's got one of them like ultra inconsistent games really, that if he misses his margin by an inch or two, it's going to be a bad day for him. He needs to be really on his game in every match, particularly against the top players, and to be more competitive. I just think it's about cutting out some of them errors, perhaps being more consistent, having a bit more variation against the top players. But there's no reason why we can't see Rublev enter the top 10. You know, he's only 22-year-old. You have to say he's already won a few titles. He's made a decent run now to Grand Slam, and I'm sure at the back end of the year he'll be making further runs in tournaments. Moved on to the 13th ranked player, Diego Schwartzman. Schwartzman is a player I'm a huge fan of. You know, he's so small, he's got so much against him, but what he lacks in height and strength, he makes up for in fight and passion, and the desire he shows on the court. These defences are arguably one of the best in the game. For Schwartzman, he won his 3rd Masters title in 2019. Very, very good on clay, and he had a fantastic clay court season last year with wins over Team Nishikori. He reached the final in Argentina. And I just think for Schwartzman it would be a massive shame this year if the clay court season was wiped out. I've read this morning that they are trying to find a way of getting the Madrid Open and the Italian Open played later in the year. The French Open's obviously rescheduled to go ahead in September and October, which would be a huge benefit to Diego Schwartzman. If we weren't to get the grass court season, it'd probably play in Schwartzman's favour rather than the many players. You know, he's not a natural grass player, but he's definitely favoured on the quicker clay court. And if we can get the Italian Open, Madrid, French Open, then it gives Schwartzman a huge chance to climb the rankings later on in the year. He did have a good run at the US Open last year, reaching the quarter final. Again, just a bit on Schwartzman's game. He doesn't have a huge weapon, does he, really, to hurt the top players? As I say, he isn't you would call the most powerful, explosive player on the tour. He's obviously very small. He's something like 5'4", 5'5". He even gets shrinked by the interviewers. But what he does, as I say, lacking power, he makes up for with his defence, his consistency. He's a real fighter. But it's his speed, agility, variations is what makes him the fantastic player he is. He's very different. He's very interesting to watch because there's not many players like him. There's not many players of his stature on the tour. And for somebody of that size to fight it out like he does with these top players who possess huge serves, huge ground strokes, is credit to himself. And he's a top player that I thoroughly enjoy watching. The next one is Not really surprised, because on his day you could say he's the top five, top three in the world on his day. It's Stan Wawrinka. He isn't even getting any younger, but he came back to form after his injury in the Australian Open and played a fantastic tournament. A few giant killings as Stan always does, and we know how good Stan is in Grand Slams, particular. He's a 3-time Grand Slam champion, and on his day I still do think Stan is one of the best players in the world. Just these ground strokes, really, how clean he hits them, that wonderful backhand, single-handed backhand's arguably the best in the world on its day, and he's a player that's turned up for the big matches throughout his career. Whenever he's reached a semi-final or final, he's produced his A game, he's given his best, and he usually plays the best points, as good as anybody in the world, really. I think he's won 3 out of 4 Grand Slam finals, which is a fantastic record, and he's a player that arguably deserves more of his career. He's flourished late, the early part of his career. I don't think Stan ever threatened to be like a multi-slam champion, but as he's got old in the last 5 or 6 years in particular, he's really found his best tennis, and as I say, his serve's getting better every season. His single-handed backhand is just getting cleaner and more powerful as the years progress. And he's becoming one of the greats to play the game, really. If he can register 4 or 5 Grand Slams, and particularly in this era of Federer, Nadal and Djokovic, he's had some fantastic battles, them sort of players, and Andy Murray, and came out with 3 Grand Slams, and it's 3 Grand Slams that he thoroughly deserves. And as I say, there's no reason why he couldn't win more in the later stage of his career. He played a fantastic Australian Open when he considered the injury that he had. And I'm sure he'll be working hard off court and looking to come back at the end of the year and hopefully play 2 Grand Slams and make big runs, as Stan always does. A similar story to Stan, really, this one. Ranked 31 in the world now, but Kei Nishikori, again a thoroughly entertaining player, quite unorthodox, but just an outstanding tennis player, really. He's won titles over the years on hard courts, a very good grass and clay court player too. He doesn't really have an outstanding service, Kei. I would say hard court if I was push, but he's a player that does produce tennis on every surface. He did obviously reach the Australian Open, US Open final them years back, but got beat off Marin Cilic, unfortunately for him. But he's been out for a long time with a knee injury, I believe. But I know he's back to full fitness now and ready to go when the season resumes. But Kei's been one of them players that's been up to consistent. He's always reached the 4th round, quarterfinals, semi-finals of Grand Slams. He's always pushed the top players, and similar to Schwartzman in a way, he hasn't got any real weaknesses in his game, but he hasn't got a real strength that can really hurt and dominate the top players. He does everything very well, but just not as well as Federer, Djokovic, Nadal. And for Kei, he does sort of rely on these top players having off days when he faces them in the big matches. But there's no reason why Kei couldn't come back stronger. He's sort of in the peak of his career now. I think he was playing some of his best tennis before the injury he suffered. And I'm sure he'll come back this year bigger, better and stronger than what he was before he left because of injury. But yeah, he's a thoroughly entertaining player to watch, Kei. He always provides us with some fantastic tennis and rallies. It's just the nature of his game and his style, and I'm looking forward to seeing Kei back. As I say, I think he's brilliant for our sport. And lastly, I had to throw in a bit of a wild one, a player that not many might think might reach the top 10, but I think in years to come he might develop and hit his prime later, similar to a few players have recently. And this person is Borna Coric. When he's 23 now, I think I watched him for the first time 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and he instantly struck me as the next Djokovic, which might sound a bit outrageous, but he's got a similar style to Djokovic, where he's got a very good defence, and he obviously Djokovic does have an outstanding shot now in his backhand and his return of serve, but in the early part of Djokovic's career, I've seen a lot of Borna Coric in him, and the fact that he's got a fantastic all-round game. I think for Coric, he hasn't made any, he's won a few ATP titles, he hasn't made a major run at a Grand Slam yet, But I think for Coric it's all about just gaining experience. You know, he's 23 now. He's had a couple of injuries in the last couple of years. And I think for him it's just about getting court time, just playing tennis as much as he can. And I think the older he gets, the better he'll get. You know, he'll get stronger as he gets older. He might develop a shot that can win matches and define him as a player, as Djokovic has done. And I think for a player of his age and his experience, I do think he possesses a very solid all-round game. You can see he must work very hard off court to have the game that he does. And I do think he's a player that could potentially be in the top 10. Maybe he's not this year or next year. You know, he is ranked in 33 now. There's a lot of good players ahead of him. A lot of players returning from injury like Nishikori, Wawrinka, Raonic, who are more geared up and probably more ready now to be challenging for the top 10. You know, Coric, I think his prime will come very later on in his career. As I say, I think he needs a couple of years on the tour, just learn experience, winning the odd title, and hopefully make a run at a major. But Coric is a player to follow for a long time, and I do think over time we are going to see the best of him. So yeah, that's all. That's my top 5 players that I think can potentially make it into the top 10 in the next year or two. If you've got any objections or any of your own opinions, just leave them in the comments below. In the meantime, I am posting on the blog as frequently as possible. I'm writing a few articles a week. I've got lots of interviews coming up. I'm just busy emailing them all questions and emailing players trying to get interviews, and it's a busy time at the minute, which would be quite a surprise with no tennis being on, but there's plenty coming on the blog, and I've got a few more ideas for videos which will be out on the channel over the next week or two. So thanks for watching again. Please like and subscribe, and I'll leave my link to the blog in the description below, and just check out any interviews or articles that you want, and I'll see you on the next video.